if you remember, I have talked about the birth of a new world society. But I'm insisting that there is no possibility of a global culture. Now, apparently there is a contradiction in this position, and I think it is useful to explain that. There is a world society in that there is a common communication system. I mean, I am here coming very, very close to Oommen's position, but not quite. What I'm trying to suggest is whatever happens in one part of the world is instantly communicated to the rest of the world if the mass media is active and authentic. I say this because occasionally we have been told that some of the human rights violations which take place in very powerful countries are not reported by, let's say, CNN or BBC for whatever reasons. But if they are active and authentic, it is quite possible to conceptualize a world wherein the communication flows are fairly easy, quick, and authentic, and therefore you can think in terms of a world society. In the sense, it is a communication system. But a world culture is a different proposition. Because, as I see it, there are 4 interrelated processes involved in the creation of what is called the global culture. These I shall call homogenization, pluralization, traditionalization, and hybridization. I should explain each of these. Would necessarily imply some possibility of homogenization if we are communicating all the time, if we are knowing what is happening in different parts of the world. It will certainly leave an impact. Maybe things like blue jeans or pop music on the one hand, and democracy on the other. Today, nobody contests the need for going democratic. Everybody wants to be democratic. So, one can think in terms of one layer of a culture, of ideas, and of course ideas is part of culture, certainly getting homogenized. But underlying this is a process of pluralization. In India, the country from which I come from, young people, yes, they use jeans, but particularly the urban youth. But on many occasions, jeans are not allowed, not used, at least not preferred. So, it is one thing to say that you have taken on an item from the package of global culture. It is another that you are using it on a regular basis. You do it selectively. Or consider Indian democracy with its multi-party system. Some of the parties being anchored to regions, to religions, to caste groups, which is quite a different phenomenon as compared with the democracies in the first world. For example, in the United States of America, it is a 2-party system. But we have, I don't know how many, maybe 120 parties, which makes a lot of difference in the working of our democracy. Now, why is it that this pluralization is required? Pluralization of culture and ideas. It is required precisely because what is being practiced should carry convictions with people. It is necessary that the local, I mean the national, needs and aspirations are felt and are taken into account. And therefore, if you are simply trying to transplant a cultural item without taking into account the specificities of the local situation, I mean the national situation, then you are in trouble. So this adaptive process, constantly brings in what I call pluralization. Now, it is also important to remember here that homogenization often means hegemonization, which means assimilation of the minority and the weaker groups into the mainstream dominant culture. And this is why homogenization would imply hegemonizing tendency. Now, this hegemonizing tendency is often countered by a search for roots, particularly the weaker and the smaller ones. And this search for roots results in revivalism, in traditionalism. And this is why I talk about traditionalization. It is not that traditionalization is a process in itself, it is a reactive process to the process of homogenization and hegemonization which it implies. Here we must distinguish between two types of traditions, little traditions and great traditions. When we talk about clash of civilizations, obviously we are talking about great traditions, the clash between the Western or the Islamic or the Hindu or whatever. But within each of these traditions, there are little traditions. Within the Christian world, certainly we know the contestations between the Catholic, the Protestant, and the Orthodox traditions. Within the Hindu fold, we know, to the extent we include the Buddhists and the Jains and the Sikhs, within the Hindu fold, there are contestations. Even if we exclude these latter religions, within the Hindu fold, the hierarchy creates problems. So, there are both clashes between great traditions and little traditions and their realities. Therefore, the tendency to homogenize willy-nilly will be countered by traditionalization. But sometimes it may not be a simple going back to tradition or revivalism. In the process of adaptation, we often try to mutate. We retain some of the traditional aspects. We also take some of the modern aspects and then try to mutate the two together. And this is a process usually referred to as hybridization. Now, sometimes this could retain the form, but changing the content. As in vegetable hamburger. If you come to India, frequently hamburgers are now available with McDonald's. But it is certainly not the one which is prepared with beef or pork, but it's other. And vegetable hamburger is very much a part of the Indian McDonald's setup. Or think of MTV, the local adaptations. Is very fascinating to see. The point is, the world society accommodates different possibilities. So repeat, homogenization, pluralization, traditionalization, and hybridization all exist side by side. There is an enormous amount of naivety and simplicity to talk about a world culture or one world culture. So let us keep it open and see how the process is working.